because life doesn't give a crap about your desires or what you think or who you are. It just is. Life happens, and that is it. And we're part of that happening. So we can move and navigate within life and manipulate it, but it ultimately manipulates us as well. Let's talk about hope. I've been writing an article about should we hope, and I've been thinking about it for a good couple months now, and I've come to the conclusion that hope should be thought of more as a gift rather than a value we should cherish. And let me try to condense the article that I'm writing into this video. So essentially, I start off with a story about a Holocaust prisoner from A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. And this prisoner, he had a dream that they would be saved on March 30th. And this hope gave him vigor to continue on. But what happened was on March 29th, there was no sign of the Americans coming to liberate them. And he started to get sick, nauseated, and starting to get bedridden, stomach upset, and like he couldn't go on. March 30th came, Americans still not here, and he goes unconscious. And March 31st comes, and he's dead. Now, it's really interesting to think that he'd be unconscious, and then he still has some unconscious awareness of his surroundings, knowing that the Americans still aren't here to save him. It's all anecdotal too, so I can't say for certain that this is what that he was unconscious for the whole time, or if he was in an out state. So that's a discussion for another day. But what I find interesting is that they say he died from an infection, a disease, but in reality he really died from a loss of hope, of the belief that the Americans were going to save him, and they didn't, not at that time at least. And a lot of Western culture would look at that as someone who lost hope and hope for the future and thus couldn't live on, and that hope is pivotal for our survival in those circumstances. I beg to differ. I think in Western culture we put too much emphasis on hope in itself, because it shouldn't be thought of as such a high value, but rather as something that is given to us in different circumstances, that we shouldn't rely on it because of two specific reasons. One, so let me lay out the definition of hope. So hope is a desire for a future outcome. And there's two problems with that. One is you start thinking in the future, and the future is not something that you can control. It's out of your hands. So let's take the example of that Auschwitz prisoner. He put his desires and hopes in the Americans coming to save him in a far distant future, but he had no control over whether the Americans would come, whether someone else would come and liberate them, or if he would die beforehand, and it was out of his control. So whenever it came to the point of March 29th, March 30th, March 31st, and life said no, you're not being saved, then he had no means of counteracting that. And essentially he lost his hope and his will to live. So for me and your values, you want to think about your values as being something that you can control. Only you can control. If you start putting your values into external environments, so for example, hope with Americans. Another good one is having a value of love instead of family. I think we talked about that last video, but whereas valuing family, your family members, you can't control. They're going to do whatever they are going to do. Even though you love them immensely, that's something that you yourself can't regulate. Whereas love is something that you yourself can control and be able to dish out, let's say. You can love yourself, you can love others, you can love the world, and you are the one who measures that. So that's why I don't think hope is a good value to put down, because you have no control over it, because it's inherently based in the future, which none of us can control, no matter what we do. And the second thing about hope is more of I think it'd be a more personal thing. I'm still thinking about it, but hope, it's a desire. It's an inherent desire for a different outcome than you have right now. At least in Buddhist teaching, desire is the core for suffering. So suffering stems from desire, and you see that at a lot because as if you desire something, let's say you desire a new laptop, right? And you get a laptop, let's say, but it breaks the second day you get it. You're gonna be devastated because you had this desire and want for a new laptop, and once you got it, it was taken away from you like that. It's something you can't. It's another thing you can't control, right? So the desire implicitly comes with the risk of devastation and disappointment. And that's why I hope in those two factors, at least for me, is very dangerous, because it's out of your control. It's because it's in the future, and it's also an inherent desire that you also can't control. But it also brings about the possibility of disappointment and devastation as well. Now, I think instead of hope, you can still have a healthy and stable lifestyle without hope, and healthy lifestyle as well. And what I'm trying to argue is that how to do that would be first an extreme acceptance of everything that happens, knowing that anything could happen to you at any moment. You could be driving down the highway and you could be hit by an 18-wheeler and then get totally paralyzed all the way down. And what I argue is that you need to have extreme acceptance that everything that happens in your life happens. You have to accept it, because life doesn't give a crap about your desires or how you think or who you are. It just is. Life happens, and that is it. And we're part of that happening. So we can move and navigate within life and manipulate it, but it ultimately manipulates us as well. And we have being born into this life, we have to accept it, or else we're gonna have a bad time. As the South Park ski instructor said, if you don't know that, look it up. Or you're gonna have a bad time. So yeah, extreme acceptance first. And then once you have extreme acceptance of everything that happens in your life, then you can go into extreme ownership. And this I took off of Jocko Willink. I still haven't read the book, but I think the main idea is that once you accept everything in your life, you can manipulate everything you have control of, or you focus on everything that you can control, and then go forward from there. That's the extreme ownership. And even if the things that you can't control, I've already accepted them into your life. So have already accepted them, and you own it as well. Just like Mark Manson said in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, is that there are plenty of situations where you're not at fault, but you're still responsible. So a good example is if a baby is left on your front porch, you're not at fault for abandoning that baby, but you're still responsible for what happens to it, because you can either not do anything and ignore it, and that's taking responsibility, because as no decision is still a decision, or you can do something else and actually take it to an orphanage, or you can adopt it. And so it's that responsibility aspect that the extreme ownership it takes. So after you do your extreme acceptance, extreme ownership, then you have the hope as a gift instead of a value. It doesn't affect you whether it does come true or doesn't come true, but if it does come true, it's something you can be grateful for, or it's a gift that you can smile upon and say, wow, I'm really grateful that this thing happened. But if it doesn't happen, then I'm none the wiser, because it's not a part of who I am. It's not one of the core values and core basis for what I believe and how I live my life. And for me, at least for me, that's a good way of moving through the world, is the extreme acceptance, extreme ownership, and then hope as a gift. Because I find myself still saying, I hope this happens. But for me, I don't value hope in that way, just because, as of what I've said before, it comes with an implicit devastation and disappointment if it doesn't happen.